Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'm KT, and this is what happened. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a Bible story. It is a shocking story about the only man in his family who escaped from Sodom and Gomorrah. That's right, this is a story of Lot. However, we're going to dive deep into the Bible because I think the true story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah will shock you. So if you're ready for this story, sit back, relax, and let's get ready for part one. Part one, Lot's family. So if you're familiar with the Bible at all, you probably know that Lot was Abraham's nephew. Yes, the same Abraham who was going to sacrifice his son in the name of the Lord. But how is he his nephew? Let's get into it. Lot's grandfather, who was Abraham's daddy, his name was Terah. Terah had three sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran had three children, Lot, Milcah, and Iscah. Milcah and Iscah were daughters. At some point, Haran dies. We don't know how. We don't know what happened. We also never learn who Lot's mother was. But we do know a couple of things. Number one, Lot's uncle Nahor ended up marrying his sister Milcah. That's right, Lot's uncle married his own niece. The other thing we know is that Terah took Lot in and he decided that he was going to move to Canaan, but along the way, he sees a city called Haran, not like the son, Haran. This one has two R's, and he decides to settle there. But not only does Pop Terah take Lot, he also takes Abraham, who the Bible also calls Abram quite frequently, and his wife Sarah with him. So there they live, and they do just fine until Pop Terah dies at 205 years old. After Pop Terah dies, that was Abraham's daddy, right? Abraham hears the voice of God, and God is telling him, you will be the father of many nations. I'm going to have a land for you. I'm not going to get all into that because this is not Abraham's story. This is Lot's story. But at the time, Abraham was 75 years old. He called Lot and told him, let's go. Abraham, Lot, and Sarah, Abraham's wife, they go on to the land of Canaan, which had been their original destination when his father had planned to move them there so many years ago. So again, because this is not Abraham's story, I will say they had some adventures in Egypt along the way, to put it mildly. We'll get into his story one day, I promise. But ultimately, the trio does land in Canaan. Fast forward, the family lands in Bethel, a city in Canaan. Abraham and Lot are living, they are thriving, maybe too well, which is a good problem to have, right? So the Bible specifically mentions that Abraham was rich in livestock, silver, and gold. He had it all, honey. Then we learn that Lot did well too. He has vast herds, he has tents set up everywhere, and he has flocks. This is when the fighting starts, not between Abraham and Lot though. Keep in mind the Canaanites are still in this land too. They need land to graze. They're fighting because they don't feel like it's enough land and greenery for the herds to thrive. Somebody needs to move. So Abraham called Lot and he said, hey, look around. What do you see? And Lot said, I see land. Everywhere I look is land. And Abraham said, exactly. So what we're not going to do is fight over land when it's abundant. We are family. Abraham tells Lot, we need to split up so that our flocks have enough land to graze. If you say you want to go right, I'll go left. If you say you want to go left, I will go right. Lot looked out towards the plain of the Jordan and he said, I'll go this way. So Abraham ended up staying in Canaan while Lot went down in the plain cities, which would be near Sodom. Abraham built an altar to the Lord because the Lord had promised to make Canaan his land. And boom, we were ready to thrive. And for the next part of the story, where we need to get into a kidnapping. So let's go to part two. Part two, a harrowing rescue. So guys, Lot is living in Sodom, and there are 5 kings in the cities around them, and in Sodom included. Bera is the king of Sodom, but I won't get into this because there are too many kings here. These 5 kings are in an alliance, but there were 4 kings that came in from the east, and they decided to fight against this alliance. Why, you may ask? That is because these 4 kings had been subject to the rule of Kedorlaomer. He was one of the kings, and he was the king of Elam, so they were tired of him, honey. They said, we're gonna rebel. After 13 years, they rebel and they draw the 5 kings out into the valley of Sodom. It is full of tar pits. A lot of the 5 kings' men fall into the tar pits. While this is happening, the 4 invading kings go into the cities and take everything. I mean, they take all the goods, the women, honey. They even take Lot because he lived there, okay? But one of the men who had escaped came back to Abraham and said, hey, they got your nephew Lot. They took everything out the cities. It's bad. Baby, when Abraham heard, he did not play. He called in 318 men who were trained in his own household. He knew they could fight. He divided them up and went out in the night. He pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. Now, we don't know exactly how far that is. It's estimated that this was between 180 and 200 miles, or 290 to 320 kilometers. But I'll tell you this, however far it was, Abraham not only brought back Lot, he got all Lot's possessions. He also got all of the possessions for the other cities and kings, including their women. One of the kings was a follower of the same God as Abraham, so he came out and blessed him. And when he did, Abraham gave him a tenth of everything he got back. But King Bera of Sodom told Abraham, which was a different king than the first one, he said, hey, just give me back the people and you can keep all the goods for yourself. But Abraham said, no, thank you, because I promised God that I would not be taking anything from you all. I don't want you to say that I made Abraham rich, because, baby, I got my own silver and gold, okay? But he said, I will accept what my men have already eaten and their share of whatever you want to give them. So, honey, Lot was rescued. Now, you may think that Lot probably was like, let me go on back to where Abraham is and stay. We'll have to deal with the land grazing issue. But no, Lot went back to his home in Sodom. With that, let's go to part 3, where we get into the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Part 3, what really happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. To understand Sodom and Gomorrah, we have to go back to Abraham and Sarah and them receiving 3 mysterious visitors. So we're not going to get into Abraham's story, like I said, but Abraham and Sarah could not have children. At this point, I think Abraham is about 95 years old and honey, Sarah is about 84 or 85 as well. So after a bunch of shenanigans, God comes with 2 angels. God appears to Abraham while he's sitting under a tree. It's these angels that he sent as visitors to him, and they're basically there to say, hey, you're gonna have a baby even though you think 85 and 95 is too old. The important thing is when these visitors are leaving, God starts to talk about, hey, you know, while we down here, there have been a lot of reports of foolery and debauchery up there at these cities on the plains. And so Abraham like, wait, what y'all talking about? And the Lord was like, should I hide it from Abram what I'm about to do? He ends up telling Abraham, I'm going to send these angels down there and I'm going to check out the reports I'm hearing for myself. If it's true, I'm going to light them things up, honey. I'm going to destroy those cities. And so Abraham is feeling bold. He goes, wait a minute. What if they're righteous people? Are you going to sweep away the good people with the bad people? What if it's 50 good people there? Dang, should you be treating the wicked and the righteous the same way? And God says, if it's 50 good men, I will leave the city alone. And baby, this is where Abraham enters the negotiations, because Abraham knew it wasn't no 50 righteous nothing down there. So Abraham says, well, wait, what if it's not 50? What if it's 5 less than that? That's not a big difference. Would you still destroy the city? And God said, if I find 45 righteous people there, no, I won't destroy the city. So Abraham said, what about 40? So Abraham is in full negotiator mode, right? And God said, okay, if it's 40, I won't destroy the city. Abraham said, well, since I'm being bold, I mean, he literally said, since, I'm being bold, because who am I? Because you're the judge of all men. What if it's only 30? And God is so agreeable today, honey. I don't know if this the same God that tried to kill Moses for not circumcising his son, but let me tell you, he was like, yeah, if it's 30, fine. So Abraham like, shoot, and for a penny and for a pound, what if it's only 20 good men there? And God said, sure, I'll do it for 20. I won't destroy the city. And Abraham like, shoot, since I'm out here gambling in these streets, what if it's only 10 good men? And God said, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy the city. A whole city, he looking for 10, okay? That's the magic number. So let's go on over to Sodom and Gomorrah. Fast forward, it's evening time and 2 angels arrive. When they get there, Lot is sitting in the gateway to the city for some reason. And I don't know if he had a feeling or if he had gotten word from Abraham. We don't know. But he's at that gate, and when he sees the 2 angels, he says, my lords, why don't you come stay at my house? I'm your servant. Stay at my house. I can wash your feet, get you something to eat. And the angel said, oh no, we'll just sleep in the town square. No big deal. Baby, they had not been down to the hoods of Sodom and Gomorrah yet, okay? But Lot said, look, I don't know if you want to do that. Why don't you come stay with me? And he insisted, and the angel said, okay, he changed their minds. So they go to Lot's house. He prepares some bread without yeast for them and a meal, and they all ate. I also need to mention that by the time we get to Sodom and Gomorrah, that's when we find out Lot has gotten married and had 2 daughters. We never hear about when they met, when they got married, any of that, when the kids were born, just so you know. They just appear. After everybody was full, they got the itis. Side note, the itis is when you have eaten good heavy food and now you are sleepy. When they were ready to go to bed, Lot's house had got surrounded by then. And baby, they were pounding on the door. But Lot wouldn't open the door. So baby, they were banging on that door and they yelled, Lot, where are those guests that you brought into your house tonight? Because baby, them men kind of fine and we want to have sex with them. Now, they didn't say they fine part, but they did say send them outside because we want to have sex with them. Yeah, baby, the town was trying to rape the angels. You didn't heard it all, okay? But no, you haven't. Just when you think you have heard something crazy in the Bible, I bet I can top it. Lot goes outside to answer them and he said, go away, but they don't leave. So when they don't leave, Lot says, look, don't do this wicked thing. Don't rape these guests of mine. But you know what? I got 2 daughters in here, and honey, they ain't never laid with no man. They virgins. You can do whatever you want to do to my daughters, but don't do anything to these men because they're under my protection. Now, when I read this, I say, now, who protection are the daughters under? Because that is real jacked up. He offered up his daughters to be raped instead of the angels. But it didn't matter because the people outside, they said, we don't want your virgin daughters. We want them 2 men you brought in because they look a little different and we want some of that. They remind Lot, you are a foreigner. I don't care how long you live here. We from here. And if you don't get out of our way, we're going to do worse to you than we going to do to them. Baby, Lot got back in the house and slammed their door. Now it's a race. We got to all get to safety. And the angels tell him as much like, this a lost cause. Ain't no 10 good men here. You need to get your family, get your wife, get whoever's important to you and go. So this is how we find out in the Bible that Lot was not saved because he was the most righteous, but because the angels had been staying in his house and were under his protection, so they offered protection back. I also have to mention the angels didn't know he had daughters, and they certainly didn't know about the offer that he made of sacrificing them, because they specifically say if you have daughters and son-in-laws, go get them because we're gonna destroy this place. But Lot starts doing this thing where he keeps hesitating, but the angels push him, hurry, because the Lord is gonna tear this place up, baby. So Lot goes and talks to the men who his daughters had been promised to marry. He goes and gets his daughters too, but when he talks to his soon-to-be son-in-laws, they don't really believe what he's saying, so they don't come with him. Lot's daughters come because, you know, they got to do what he say, right? When he came back with the daughters and the wife, the angel said, hurry up, Lot, you got to move. Lot was moving too slow, so the angels physically grab him and push him like, go. As the angels get Lot, his wife, and daughters out of the city, they say, you keep running. Do not stop anywhere on the plains because God's going to destroy all these cities on the plains. Basically, beyond the plains were mountains. That's where he needed to go. Lot says, I don't want to go to the mountains. If I have to go to the mountains, I'm going to die up there. So can we just go to this little city? Zor is small. You know, can't God just not destroy it? And I'm reading this like, who is going to argue with this? If you say you're destroying these cities and I'm free, I'm going to where you tell me to go to. And the Lord said, fine, he can go to Zor. I won't destroy Zor. The angels told him, do not stop till you get there. Do not turn back. I also need to mention that a lot of times we learn that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, but Admah, Zeboim, those cities, also the valley in between, all the plant life and growth in the area were destroyed too. God rained down burning sulfur on all those cities and plains, destroying everything around it. And he did that as soon as the sun came up. But Lot and his daughters had made it safely. Along the way, his wife turned around and looked back, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. So once everything was finished being destroyed, Lot went and he looked out at everything that had been destroyed. God has spared Lot because the Bible says, this is Genesis chapter 19, verse 29. It is specifically stated that God saved Lot really because he remembered Abraham, not because he was so righteous or righteous at all. Let's go into part 4 where we're going to talk about what happened to Lot and his daughters. This is the part they never talk about or never did in any church I went to. Part 4, the aftermath. This is the story of what happened to Lot and his daughters after they survived and escaped the destruction destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other two cities that were destroyed. So after Lot had argued to stay in this very small city of Zor, which was spared, he ended up being too afraid to stay there, and he ended up going to the mountains anyway with his two daughters, and they were living in a cave, the three of them. We never learned the names of Lot's daughters, by the way. But after some time in the cave, the oldest daughter goes to the youngest daughter and says, "Girl, we living in this cave and ain't no men around here to give us children. And you know, that's the custom of everybody on the whole earth to have kids. This is what we should do. We should get our father to drink wine, and then we should sleep with him so that he could give us children." Because what? They didn't waste no time. The Bible says that night they got their father drunk with wine, and the oldest daughter went in and slept with him. The Bible makes a point to say Lot was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. I don't know if I believe it, but let's keep it moving, okay? The next day, the oldest daughter says to the younger daughter, "Let's get him drunk again, because that worked pretty well. Then you can go lay with him, and that way we are preserving our family line through our father." They got their father drunk again with the wine, and then the youngest daughter went in and she had sex with the daddy. And the Bible says again, he was not aware when she lay down or when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their daddy. This is the part that's gonna trip you out. The oldest daughter had a son who she named Moab, and this is where the Moabites supposedly came from. And the youngest daughter had a son who she named Ben-Ami, and this is where the Ammonites came from. They were constantly warring with the Israelite people and the people of Judah, because their wife was still a pillar of salt blowing in the wind by now. With that, we're gonna get into my final thoughts. Part 5. As I get into my final thoughts, there is one thing I definitely want to address, that Sodom and Gomorrah were not the only cities to be destroyed, and that the Bible never explicitly says that these cities were destroyed because of homosexuality. I have to bring this up because growing up in the Bible Belt, I have heard many preachers preach this, whereas it is said nowhere. There are some reasons listed for the destruction of the cities. The Bible talks about in Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 49 how the people had plenty of food, they were idle, and they were prideful. At the same time, they never did anything to strengthen the hand of the poor and needy, meaning they never reached back to help anybody else. The other verse referenced a lot is Jude chapter 1 verse 7, and it does say that the people had given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh. That could be a number of things. I want to throw away the narrative that these cities were destroyed because people were gay. That's not what happened. Something that really stands out to me when I'm reading these verses, when the people come and knock on Lot's door, they mention to him that you cannot tell us what to do. You're a foreigner, a sojourner, as the Bible calls them, an immigrant. So were the angels that came. And I do think that's why they denied taking Lot's daughters. I think it meant more to them to humiliate a foreigner. And even they said, if you don't give them up, we're going to do worse to you. What had probably kept Lot a little safer than most is that he was wealthy. But either way, people are not going to agree on these things, and that's fine. But I don't believe in using the Bible to stomp down a group of people. Because being honest, that has been done to my people, Black Americans from the United States, in our history of slavery. The Bible was used as a tool to hold us down. We'll get into that in a history video, though. One of the other things I got from this was Lot. You know, I kept asking myself, why was he so hesitant to leave this city, even after he knew that God is going to destroy it? And the angels had to literally grab him by the hands and yank him along. Like, come on, let's go. I just know it wouldn't have took me that much to leave. And even once he got out, the fact that he argued about, hey, where am I going to go? I don't want to go to this mountain like you said. I don't know. Something was off about Lot. And if you did know it, when he offered his virgin daughters up to the violent crowd, it's raggedy, it's trash. I can't say enough bad things about him. On top of that, growing up, I never knew this. I feel like I was in my early 20s and I was rereading about Sodom and Gomorrah, and I kept reading. I didn't stop when the cities were destroyed, which is where I usually stop, because growing up in church, Every sermon about Sodom and Gomorrah, it would start at point A. The big sticking point would be, oh, you don't look back when God gives you a blessing, because Lot's wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. And that's where the sermons always ended, guys. So when I kept reading, baby, I was flabbergasted. You're telling me Lot's daughters had kids with him? Even for Bible times, baby, that was too close to home, baby. That was giving Targaryens in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. What are we doing? Baby, it's giving Lestat in the Interview for a Vampire. What are we doing? I thought that was crazy. I just found it weird that it happened twice and he had no idea. And the only reason I find that strange is based on what we already know about Lot. We already know he offered his daughters up because he didn't give two doggons about them to a crowd to have their way with them. If you just look at the parts about Lot, this is where you start to see some of Abraham's redeeming qualities, because I promise you, when we get into his story one day, you're going to be like, he did what? Wait, what happened? You're going to be shocked, because it's not just the willingness to sacrifice the kid, because that can be spun. The biggest takeaway I got from this story is that there were not 10 righteous people in this city. And that's not just the men. That was the women too. And what is righteous? What's the definition of that? Because I promise, the more you read the Bible, you don't know. We did King David's story. I'm going to link it at the end, because this was somebody who God held in favor. But boy, David did a lot of questionable things. So guys, this is where I'm going to end this Bible story. Next time we will have a history story. I already know who we're going to talk about, and I'll give you a clue. She's an athlete. So guys, until next time, remember, keep reading and learning. Be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye bye.